Burton Snowboards are almost synonymous with snowboarding in general. It's hard to think about the sport without the boards that Jake Burton Carpenter developed while working out of a building right on Main Street in North Londonderry. That building isn't there anymore, but on Tuesday, October 3rd at 11 a.m., a historic site marker will be placed across the street in the Williams Park to commemorate the life and work of Jake Burton Carpenter, without whom it's hard to imagine snowboarding ever becoming the Olympic sport and big industry it's become since 1977, when Burton Boards began. After the ceremony, a reception will be held just around the corner on Middletown Road, where in a small former barn, an exhibit of snowboarding titled First Tracks, with much of its focus on Jake Burton Carpenter and Burton Snowboards, has been on display since September 2nd. The Londonderry Arts and Historical Society is hosting the exhibit there, adjacent to the former home of painter and illustrator Bernadine Custer Sharp, and together the two buildings are where the society is based. The exhibit will be up until October 8th. That's where we met up with Gail Mann, one of the organizers of the exhibit, who walked us through it.
So starting here, we're telling the story. Jake arrives in Vermont, 1977, and initially he was a caretaker at Nick Adamson's Spring Hill farm there, okay? He basically took care of the dogs and the horses during the day. Also worked at the Burton House, which was a very lively place up on Stratton back in those days. So he bartended, did all kinds of jobs there with Ted Janeway, by the way. Senator Janeway did a lot for this community, and Ted is his grandson. At any rate, so that was a connection there. Also, the people who helped Jake find Adamson's farm, where he, was taking care of things. Mimi Wright, brother Mark Wright, okay, and they were living here, and it turns out their older brother Andrew is actually now married to Jake's sister. All right, so there were some family connections that brought him here. So the first three people, he worked a good year on the prototype, literally in the mudroom. Okay, it was in the mudroom he worked, and it kind of looks like a bench like that when you go visit it. Nick has kept it very much almost like a little museum piece that he keeps there. And started working on that, and not so dissimilar for the way that looks. But then they got into, this was a electrical company garage where they stored electrical and all kinds of stuff. And that was on Main Street. If you go on Main Street right now, you'll see the butcher, the Vermont Butcher, and it's right to the left. That's where it was. It unfortunately burned down, and I heard that Jake very much wanted to buy it, and the Gordons, the owners, just didn't want to sell it, and then it burned down, which, it was sad. And it was sad, I guess, for Jake. He would have kept it. So these are the letters from the original building. And thanks to Todd, TK Coleman, he loaned us all these great items. So going back, once I got into what is called the factory, the Burton factory, 3 employees, Mimi, brother Mark, and a fellow named Mike Malloy. We haven't been able to find Mike, but at any rate. Mimi has a great story here. She was the artist in residence. She designed the logo that they're still using today. And that's her silk screen. You can tell it's original blue board. And actually that's a snowboard Mimi made herself one day when all the guys were out. And so she took over and made that. And I think you see here, it all started off called snow surfing. And Jake, I have a very nice intro movie that I'm happy to put on for you. But he was introduced to a Snurf, I think he was around 12, and he fell in love with this idea. So it was always on his mind. So the reason he left, he was working in an investment firm in New York, and he was just like, I want to do this. So he moved up here, and that's how all of this started. So you'll see he went on hillsides. There's great stories. They had to hike up mountains back then because you weren't allowed on any of the resort mountains. But you could also, Snow Valley, you'll read about Snow Valley, Magic did allow it. But to really test it, they love fresh snow. So they would climb up all these back hills and just take that board down and have a ball. And he does really think of it. You'll see in the early, even in the early ads, it was called snow surfing. Okay. So here's, we tried to show, that's Jake's jacket. We tried to, show the progression, how they get a board like that, and he learned, he was constantly trying to tweak it to get the right curve so that it was more efficient and would no longer need the rope, because eventually they could do that. But that's kind of the first Burton blue board everybody knows, and then they progressed, and this is a little wider, you can even see, but they liked just the natural wood. Here's some drawings. Jake kept every note there. You can't imagine the things in the archive. So this is just a page out of a notebook that they loaned us. Here's a little inventory list. Some drawings of early ideas for clothing, which he got into pretty quickly over time. But you'll see, I was always trying to figure out, how do you carve this? How do you make it flexible? And if you think about it, he really contributed to our skiing today, because now our skis also mimic that. So here we move into, this is when they were selling. There was a teacher in town, Bevy Foster, who actually worked in the first call center here. And she told me how she would get these phone calls from these little voices saying, I want the backyard board, or I want the back hill board, and they would process these. And you can also see he originally advertised in the skateboard magazines, because that was really what it's about. This you'll get it if you watch the movie's only 3 minutes, so we'll watch that. But there was the snurfer, the fellow who developed the snurfers out in Minnesota, I believe, tells us in the movie. And they would have the snurfing contest. So Jake shows up with his board that he had designed, and he created a new category, calling it snow surfing. So he won the race because he was the only one in it. But, anyways, we don't know whether he would have won on the snurfer or not. And this is kind of fun when he got a lot of young people in, like on their holiday vacations, college kids. And he would pay them by taking them snow surfing on safaris up the back mountains. So it could be the back of Bromley or Stratton or any of the ones, most likely Snow Valley, because that was a manageable one to hike up. I love here too, this little article appeared in Time magazine. So basically everybody, quite honestly, when Jake was originally designing this around ski people, like Nick Adamson's friends, they just thought he was crazy. I mean, what are you doing? What are you trying to do? But he loved it, and kind of got into it. And this is, you can see the old boots that they used, nothing like today. These are the directions for how to use the backyard one that they would send out on how to use it. So I think this board is great with telling you what it was like. In the first year they sold some 300, but it was tough going. It was very tough going. We love seeing Donna and Jake in this. They met at the Mill Tavern on Main Street. And that was around 1980, 81. So he was already selling, and Donna will tell you in a minute, at least everybody says this, that she also thought he was, what are you doing? This is your life. But he took her out, and she loved it too, and that was kind of history. And she was a major driver in everything that happened from then on.
Several well-known snowboarders, friends of Jake and his wife Donna Carpenter, are expected to be at the unveiling of the historic site marker, which we'll be covering as well in another segment. And the First Tracks exhibit will be there to supply the background. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.